In remote Colorado territory, a young ranchwoman was about to seal her fate. What started as tending an injured horse took a shocking turn when she encountered the most wanted outlaw's stallion. Sarah Mae Whitfield wasn't your typical frontier woman. For 8 years, she'd healed wounded animals others abandoned, known for her gentle touch with hopeless cases. When the magnificent black stallion limped to her barn at midnight, she had no idea she was walking into the Blackwood Gang's crosshairs. Her compassionate choice would lead to devastating consequences. The outlaws claimed what you touch, you own. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Lily's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as her BMW wound through the tree-lined approach to the Morrison estate. The November afternoon sun filtered through bare branches, casting long shadows across the pristine asphalt that led to the imposing iron gates bearing the family crest. A golden eagle clutching a scroll that read, Veritas et Virtus, Truth and Virtue. The irony wasn't lost on her. Those gates are new, she said, forcing lightness into her voice as the ornate barriers swung open with silent precision. Mother had them installed last spring. She said the old ones weren't, quote, substantial enough. Marcus studied the approaching mansion through the passenger window, his expression thoughtfully neutral. The 3-story Georgian colonial sprawled across perfectly manicured grounds, its brick facade and white columns radiating the kind of understated elegance that screamed old money, even though the Morrison fortune was barely 40 years old. Fountains anchored circular driveways, and topiary gardens stretched toward tennis courts and stables that few family members ever used but everyone insisted on maintaining. It's impressive, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying neither the awe nor the intimidation Lily had witnessed in other boyfriends when first confronted with her family's wealth. His calm acceptance both relieved and unnerved her. Why wasn't he more affected by all this? The main house has 18 rooms, Lily continued, unable to stop herself from filling the silence with nervous chatter. Though we only really use about half of them. Mother keeps threatening to downsize, but then she remembers how it looks for fundraising events and... She caught herself rambling and pressed her lips together. Marcus turned to study her profile, noting the tension in her jaw, the way her knuckles had gone white against the leather steering wheel. Lily. His voice was gentle but firm. It's going to be fine. She wanted to believe him, but Marcus didn't understand. He hadn't grown up watching her mother dissect potential suitors like specimens under a microscope, cataloging their family connections, their educational pedigree, their earning potential. He hadn't witnessed Charlotte's systematic destruction of Lily's previous relationships through cutting observations about their prospects or breeding. He'd never seen how quickly her father could shift from warm patriarch to calculating businessman when evaluating whether someone was worthy of the Morrison name. The circular driveway crunched beneath their tires as they pulled up beside a fleet of luxury vehicles. Charlotte's pristine white Tesla, James's gunmetal Porsche, and her parents' matching his and hers Mercedes sedans. Lily's stomach churned as she noticed how Marcus's simple khakis, button-down shirt, and worn leather jacket would look next to James's undoubtedly bespoke suit and Charlotte's designer ensemble. Remember what I told you about Charlotte, Lily said as she turned off the engine. She can be competitive. And James, he's old money, so he has opinions about people like me? Marcus's smile held no bitterness, only gentle understanding. No, that's not what I meant. But wasn't it? Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks. They just have very specific ideas about success and compatibility, and... The front door opened before she could finish her thought, and Elena Santos appeared on the threshold. The family's longtime housekeeper moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had managed wealthy households for decades, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her simple black dress and crisp white apron suggesting competence rather than servitude. "Miss Lily!" Elena's face brightened with genuine warmth as they approached. "And you must be Marcus. I've heard so much about you." Lily watched Marcus's response carefully. Some of her previous boyfriends had treated Elena with the kind of performative politeness that barely masked their discomfort with addressing, quote, the help. Others had ignored her entirely, as if she were part of the furniture. Marcus stepped forward and extended his hand with a natural smile. "Mrs. Santos, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me in your home." Elena's eyebrows rose slightly at being addressed so formally and respectfully. She clasped his hand in both of hers, her weathered fingers noting his calluses, the hands of someone who worked with books, who wrote by hand, who chose substance over appearance. "Please, call me Elena, and welcome to the family dinner. I hope you're hungry. I may have gotten a little carried away with the preparations. If it smells half as good as it did when we walked up, I'm sure it's perfect," Marcus replied, and Lily could tell Elena was charmed by his easy sincerity. "Lily, darling." Victoria Morrison's voice cut through the warm moment like a blade through silk. Lily's mother emerged from the foyer, her Chanel suit impeccable, her platinum hair styled to perfection, her smile as calculated as a surgeon's incision. At 55, Victoria had maintained the kind of polished beauty that money could buy: regular treatments, personal trainers, and the best cosmetic procedures performed with such skill that they appeared natural. "Mother." Lily accepted the air kiss that avoided disturbing Victoria's lipstick while feeling Marcus's attention shift to the interchange. Victoria's pale blue eyes fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a jeweler examining a questionable stone. "And this must be the young man we've been so curious about." "Marcus Chen," he said, stepping forward to offer his hand. Victoria accepted it with the barest contact necessary for politeness, her fingers barely grazing his palm before withdrawing. "Victoria Morrison, Lily has told us so little about you, I'm afraid we've all been quite intrigued." The pause before intrigued carried volumes of meaning. "I hope to remedy that this evening, Mrs. Morrison. Thank you for including me in your family's celebration." "Of course." Victoria's smile never wavered, but Lily caught the microscopic tightening around her mother's eyes as she catalogued Marcus's simple clothing, his lack of expensive accessories, his failure to exhibit the kind of polished presentation she expected from her daughter's companions. The sound of gravel crunching announced another arrival, and Charlotte's Tesla glided to a stop behind Lily's BMW. Lily's older sister emerged first, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, her burgundy wool dress perfectly tailored to her slender frame. Even at 32, Charlotte maintained the kind of severe beauty that photographed well at charity galas and society functions. James unfolded himself from the driver's seat with practiced elegance, his cashmere overcoat and Italian leather shoes representing more money than most people spent on their cars. At 35, he carried himself with the unconscious arrogance of someone who had never questioned his place in the world's hierarchy. "Lily!" Charlotte's embrace was warmer than their mother's but carried undertones of evaluation. "And you must be Marcus." "I'm Charlotte, Lily's sister, and this is my husband James." James extended a hand with the kind of firm grip meant to establish dominance. "James Blackwell. Pleasure to meet you." Marcus met the handshake evenly, neither attempting to prove his strength nor yielding to James's subtle pressure. "Marcus Chen. Thank you for having me." "Chen," James repeated as if testing the sound. "That's Chinese?" "My father's family came from Taiwan," Marcus replied without defensiveness. "My mother's side is Irish-German." "How interesting," Charlotte said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And what do you do, Marcus?" "I manage a bookstore in Brooklyn." The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but to Lily, it felt like an eternity. She watched her family absorb this information. Not just the modest profession, but the location, the implications about earning potential and social position. "How?" "Literary," Victoria finally said, investing the word with the kind of faint praise that was actually criticism. Elena, who had been quietly observing this interchange, cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should move this inside? I have appetizers ready in the living room, and Mr. Morrison should be down shortly." "Of course," Victoria agreed, though her eyes remained fixed on Marcus. "Marcus, I do hope you won't mind if we pick your brain about the book business. We're always curious about different perspectives on commerce." As they moved toward the house, Lily noticed how Marcus quietly took one of the shopping bags Elena was carrying, earning him a grateful smile from the housekeeper and a slight frown from her mother. The gesture was so natural, so unconscious, that it revealed something fundamental about his character, the kind of automatic kindness that couldn't be performed or faked. Inside the mansion's foyer, Marcus took in the soaring ceilings, the crystal chandelier that cast rainbow fragments across marble floors, the oil paintings of Morrison ancestors, who had actually been poor Irish immigrants but were now portrayed as landed gentry. His expression remained composed, observant but not overwhelmed, as if he were cataloging details for later consideration rather than being impressed by the display of wealth. Victoria watched him carefully, clearly disappointed by his lack of visible awe. In her experience, this level of luxury either intimidated people into submission or inspired them to obvious social climbing. Marcus's quiet assessment suggested neither reaction, which unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "Well," Victoria said, her smile sharp as winter sunlight, "this should certainly be an interesting evening." As Elena led them toward the living room, Lily caught Marcus's subtle glance in her direction, not seeking reassurance or showing anxiety, but simply acknowledging that he understood exactly what kind of examination he was about to undergo. His calm acceptance both comforted and worried her. She'd wanted him to be himself, but now she wondered if being himself would be enough to survive what her family was preparing to dish out. Marcus's hand rested lightly on Lily's lower back as they entered the Morrison family's grand living room, a gesture of subtle support that didn't go unnoticed by Victoria's calculating gaze. The room itself was a monument to carefully curated taste. Persian rugs worth more than most people's homes, original oil paintings by artists whose names carried weight at auction houses, and furniture that whispered old money despite being purchased within the last decade. Richard Morrison stood near the marble fireplace, his silver hair perfectly styled, his navy blazer bearing the understated elegance of Savile Row tailoring. At 62, he maintained the bearing of a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms and closing deals worth millions. His smile was warm but brief as he crossed the room to greet them. "You must be Marcus," Richard said, extending a firm handshake that carried the weight of evaluation. "Richard Morrison, welcome to our home." "Thank you for having me, Mr. Morrison. Your home is beautiful." "Please sit wherever you're comfortable." Victoria gestured toward the seating arrangement she'd clearly orchestrated. Marcus would be positioned on the settee farthest from the family cluster, subtly isolated while remaining part of the conversation circle. Elena appeared with a silver tray bearing crystal glasses and expensive hors d'oeuvre. Marcus rose immediately to help her distribute the refreshments, a gesture that earned him Elena's grateful smile and Victoria's barely concealed disapproval. "How thoughtful," Charlotte observed, settling into her preferred armchair with feline grace, though Elena is perfectly capable of managing on her own. "She's been with the family for 15 years. "Of course," Marcus replied evenly, returning to his seat. "I just prefer to help when I can." James swirled his scotch, the amber liquid catching the firelight. "Different households, different customs, I suppose. Where I grew up, staff handled service while guests focused on conversation." "Where exactly did you grow up, Marcus?" Victoria inquired, her tone suggesting casual interest while her eyes catalogued his every response. "Queens, originally. My parents ran a small restaurant there until I was 12. Then we moved to Brooklyn when they bought a larger place." "Restaurant owners," Richard nodded approvingly. "Entrepreneurial spirit. Always respected that in people." "What kind of restaurant?" Charlotte asked, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer wouldn't impress her. "Chinese-American cuisine. Nothing fancy, but they worked 16-hour days to build something lasting." The brief silence that followed carried weight. Lily watched her family process this information, noting how James's expression shifted almost imperceptibly toward condescension, while Charlotte's smile became more practiced. "How industrious," Victoria said with the kind of tone reserved for discussing quaint local businesses. "And they supported your education through the restaurant?" "They insisted on it. Both my parents believed education was the only inheritance they could give me that nobody could take away." "Wise philosophy," Richard agreed, though Lily caught the subtle calculation in his eyes, assessing whether Marcus's education might elevate his status despite his humble origins. Where did you attend university? James inquired, settling back in his leather chair with the casual arrogance of someone whose own Ivy League credentials were assumed. I got my bachelor's degree from Brooklyn College, then my master's in literature from NYU. NYU, Charlotte repeated, investing the words with faint praise. Not Harvard or Yale, but still respectable. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but Lily caught the slight tightening around his eyes. It served my purposes well. And what exactly are those purposes? Victoria asked, leaning forward slightly. Lily mentioned you work in books, but surely someone with your education has larger aspirations. I manage an independent bookstore in Park Slope. It's work I find meaningful. Meaningful, James repeated, tasting the word like wine that might have turned, but hardly lucrative, I imagine. James, Lily interjected, color rising in her cheeks. What? It's a reasonable question. We're all curious about Lily's choice in companions. Elena, who had been quietly arranging items on the side table, shot James a look of pure disapproval before catching herself and returning to her tasks. The bookstore serves the community, Marcus explained patiently. We host reading groups, support local authors, provide a space for people to discover literature they might not find elsewhere. The compensation isn't primarily financial. How romantic, Charlotte said, her smile sharp as cut crystal. Though I imagine romance becomes challenging when practical considerations arise. Mortgages, insurance, planning for the future. Charlotte has a point, Victoria added smoothly. Lily's accustomed to certain standards of living. Her social media career provides substantial income, but relationships require compatibility and lifestyle expectations. Lily felt heat flooding her face. Mother, please. I'm simply being practical, darling. These are conversations mature couples need to have. Marcus set down his glass with deliberate care. Mrs. Morrison, I understand your concerns about Lily's welfare. Any parent would want to ensure their daughter's happiness and security. Exactly, Victoria smiled, pleased to find common ground. However, Marcus continued, his voice remaining calm but carrying new authority, I think you might be surprised by what actually makes Lily happy. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. James leaned forward, his interest piqued by what sounded like challenge in Marcus's tone. Oh? Victoria's eyebrows rose elegantly. And what might that be? Authenticity. Genuine connection. Someone who sees her intelligence and creativity rather than just her family name or social media following. Those are lovely sentiments, Charlotte said condescendingly. But sentiment doesn't pay bills or maintain social position. Does it need to? Marcus asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Lily watched her family grapple with the radical notion that their values might not be universal truths. Richard cleared his throat, attempting to steer the conversation towards safer ground. Marcus, tell us about your long-term plans. 5 years, 10 years. Where do you see yourself? Building something meaningful, whether that's expanding the bookstore, writing, or finding other ways to contribute to my community. Writing? Victoria's interest sharpened. Fiction? Poetry, actually. And some essay work. James barely suppressed a snort. Poetry? Well, that's artistic. James writes too, Charlotte offered with false brightness. Legal briefs primarily, but he's quite skilled with language. Different purposes, Marcus acknowledged diplomatically. Elena approached with dinner preparations, and Lily noticed how Marcus automatically stood to assist her again, despite the family's subtle disapproval. His consistency and kindness revealed something fundamental about his character that her family seemed incapable of recognizing. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, Elena announced. Wonderful, Victoria said, her smile returning to full wattage. Marcus, I do hope you're prepared for Elena's cooking. She's quite the artist in the kitchen. I'm looking forward to it, Marcus replied, and Lily could tell Elena appreciated his genuine enthusiasm. As conversations resumed, Lily observed her family with new clarity. Charlotte's constant need to prove her superiority, James's casual cruelty masquerading as sophistication, Her mother's relentless social calculation, her father's passive enablement of toxic dynamics, all of it suddenly seemed exhausting and small. Meanwhile, Marcus remained centered in himself, neither defensive nor aggressive, simply authentic in ways her family couldn't recognize, because they'd forgotten what authenticity looked like. The battle lines were drawn, though only Lily seemed to realize that the evening's real test wasn't whether Marcus could prove himself worthy of their approval. It was whether she could find the courage to choose love over legacy. Part 3. The dinner setting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The battle lines were drawn, and Marcus sensed the shift in atmosphere as Elena announced dinner was served. Victoria rose with practiced grace, her smile never wavering despite the tension that had settled over the living room like morning frost. "Shall we?" Victoria gestured toward the dining room with theatrical flourish, as if unveiling a masterpiece, which, in her mind, she was. The formal dining room took Lily's breath away, as it always did during holiday gatherings. The mahogany table stretched nearly 12 feet, its surface reflecting the warm glow of 3 crystal chandeliers that cast dancing shadows across walls, lined with oil paintings of European landscapes the family had never visited, but owned nonetheless. Place settings of bone china, the spode pattern Victoria had inherited from Richard's mother, gleamed against ivory linen, each setting worth more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus paused in the doorway, taking in the elaborate display. 24 pieces of silverware surrounded each plate. Crystal stemware caught the light like trapped rainbows, and centerpieces of white orchids and autumn leaves created islands of carefully orchestrated beauty along the table's length. "Impressive," he said quietly, and Lily couldn't tell if he was genuinely admiring the scene or simply being polite. "Mother's pride and joy," Charlotte said, moving to her designated seat with the familiarity of decades of formal dinners. She redecorated the entire room last spring. The chandelier alone cost more than most people's cars. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly at Charlotte's casual revelation of expense, but she recovered quickly. "I believe in creating an atmosphere worthy of important occasions." Elena had outdone herself with the meal presentation. The turkey, golden and glistening, sat on a silver platter that had belonged to Richard's grandmother. Side dishes filled serving bowls of matching china. Cornbread stuffing with chestnuts and sage, roasted root vegetables glazed with maple syrup, green bean casserole topped with crispy onions, and cranberry sauce made from berries grown on a Massachusetts bog. The family had visited once for the authentic experience. "Elena, this is magnificent," Marcus said as she finished arranging the serving pieces. "You've created something truly special." Elena's weathered face brightened with genuine pleasure. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I hope you enjoy everything." "Please, just Marcus. And I'm sure I will." Victoria observed this exchange with growing irritation. In her carefully ordered world, guests complimented the hostess, not the help. Marcus's consistent acknowledgement of Elena suggested either ignorance of proper etiquette or deliberate defiance of social hierarchy. "Elena has been with us for 15 years, Victoria said pointedly. "She knows exactly how we prefer things done." Richard took his position at the head of the table, gesturing for everyone to find their seats. Victoria had orchestrated the seating arrangement with military precision, herself at the foot, Charlotte and James to Richard's right, Lily and Marcus isolated on the left side where their conversation could be easily monitored and controlled. As they settled into their chairs, Marcus noticed the subtle but deliberate messaging in every detail. His placement furthest from the hosts, the way conversations naturally flowed away from his position, even the angle of his chair that made him feel slightly outside the family circle, all of it designed to reinforce his status as outsider. "Marcus," Richard said, unfolding his linen napkin with practiced precision, "before we begin, perhaps you'd like to share what you're thankful for this year." The request, delivered with patriarchal warmth, carried undertones of examination. Everyone at the table understood this wasn't about gratitude. It was about measuring Marcus's values against their own. Marcus considered the question seriously, his gaze moving around the table before settling on Lily. "I'm grateful for unexpected connections. for finding someone who sees the world with genuine curiosity and kindness, and for the opportunity to experience traditions different from my own." "How diplomatic," James murmured, cutting into his turkey with surgical precision. "What traditions does your family observe for Thanksgiving?" Charlotte asked, her tone suggesting academic interest while her expression revealed something closer to anthropological curiosity. "We usually gathered at my parents' restaurant. After closing, we'd cook together, traditional dishes mixed with some Chinese-American fusion. My mother always made pumpkin dumplings alongside the turkey." "How eclectic," Victoria said, investing the word with faint distaste. "Different cultural perspectives can be enriching," Richard offered diplomatically, though his tone suggested he found such mixing more confusing than enriching. Elena appeared with wine, a Bordeaux that Richard had selected to showcase his knowledge of fine vintages. As she poured, Marcus noticed her slight nod of approval when he thanked her quietly. "This wine is exceptional," Marcus said after tasting it. "The tannins are beautifully balanced." Richard's eyebrows rose with surprise and something approaching respect. "You know wine? My parents' restaurant had a small but carefully chosen wine list. I learned to appreciate quality through necessity. Customers expected good pairings with their meals." "Interesting," James said, though his tone suggested Marcus's knowledge was somehow diminished by its practical origins. Charlotte leaned forward slightly, her lawyer's instincts sensing an opportunity. "Marcus, I'm curious about your business model. Independent bookstores seem so vulnerable in today's market. How do you stay profitable?" The question was delivered with surgical precision, designed to expose financial weakness and poor business acumen. Lily felt her stomach tighten as she recognized her sister's interrogation techniques. "We focus on community building rather than pure profit maximization," Marcus replied calmly. "Regular customers, book clubs, author readings, partnerships with local schools. People value personal relationships over corporate efficiency." "But surely that's not sustainable long-term," James interjected. "When Amazon can deliver any book overnight at a lower price, what's your competitive advantage?" "Experience, discovery, human connection, things that can't be digitized or shipped." Victoria set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "That sounds idealistic, Marcus. Admirable, certainly, but perhaps not entirely practical for someone considering significant future commitments." The words hung in the air like smoke from a recently fired gun. Everyone understood the implication. Marcus's career couldn't support the lifestyle expectations that came with marrying into the Morrison family. Lily felt heat rising in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Marcus spoke with quiet authority. "Mrs. Morrison, I believe different people define success differently. Financial security matters, certainly, but so does work that has meaning beyond the bottom line." "Meaning doesn't pay mortgages," Charlotte observed with the cold precision of someone who had never questioned whether her work had meaning beyond billable hours. "Perhaps not," Marcus agreed, "but it provides something money can't purchase: genuine satisfaction with how you spend your days."